Hey, what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist for Cryptopsy, and you're listening to my podcast, Vox and Hops, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians to talk about their lives, music, and craft beer. I hope that you've had a great week. I hope that you're ready for the weekend. I am. Last night was epic. Again, of course, I am loving these, the Vox and Hops Thirsty Thursday virtual hangs. Cheers to everyone that was there. I'm super stoked for next week already. I love this group. I love what has come from it. I love our connections. I love the sense of community that we've built. So massive shout out to absolutely everyone for being there. Massive shout out to Yolai for hosting last week's after party. Stoked about that. Thank you so much, Yolai. On today's episode, I am with Mary Zimmer, the vocalist of Helion Prime and the VoiceHacks YouTube channel. So here it is. Get ready. This is Vox and Hops, episode number 146.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Today I'm with Mary Zimmer from VoiceHacks, the YouTube channel, and Helion Prime. It is great to finally catch up with you. You are someone that I've been following on YouTube since early summer last year, and someone that's been on my radar that I've been wanting to have an interview with. But before the pandemic hit, I would never, ever consider doing a interview based over the internet. So I'm happy that we can hook up now. If not, I would have had to go to Vegas and have an interview there, which I've only played Vegas once, and it wasn't a good show.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, this is really unique to be able to do this.
It's, COVID-19 has brought many things, and that's the ability to grab everyone while they're at home. So,
yeah, exactly. You can catch people right now. They're not going anywhere.
They can't.
Right, they can't. So
how are you?
But thanks for having me.
Yes, of course.
Oh, thanks. I'm great. Thank you for having me so much. I really love your podcast, and I think it's really neat, the Vox and Hops idea. So I'm stoked to be on it. This is great.
Thank you. Let's touch on social isolation. I know that you are a very busy YouTuber, so you're probably at home just as much as usual.
Yeah, it's really weird. My job has not changed, and nothing. In fact, I've only gotten busier with lessons since this has started. So it's a blessing, thankfully, because I'm still employed, which is cool. But it's like I've been doing all the lessons on Skype for 5 years now. So I never am in the same room with anybody ever. So as long as everybody's feeling good, I mean, they're still coming, and some people, they have more time to work on their vocals. Like I have a lot of people who are supposed to be on tour that they're not on tour. And so they're doing their lessons and stuff. So it's been crazy. And yeah, I've been busier than ever. Like, I think I'm the only one who's not like resting in the pandemic. So I feel fortunate, though.
It's a lucky thing. I think YouTubers and people like me that have been using it to conduct interviews are very busy if they're attacking their time properly.
Yes, exactly.
Take me back to your youth, a classic Vox and Hops question. What was the soundtrack of your youth when you were growing up? What music was playing in your house when you were not in control of the music?
When I was not in control of the music? Okay, well, fortunately, my parents, who are not musicians at all, had really good taste in music, though. From like the 60s and the 70s, they definitely would be boomer generation, And so they had a kick-ass record collection, which was really cool. And so they had great taste. And definitely they were like huge Beatles fans, but also, it was the 80s and the 90s. So there was a lot of, like, my parents really loved Chicago. They're from Chicago. So there's a lot of Chicago. They liked America. They liked Elton John. Gosh, but they had all the great records, Dark Side of the Moon, everything. So even though they were not at all musicians, we actually had good music, cool music in our house growing up, which is a surprise, I think.
They had good friends around them, maybe, that were influencing them.
Yeah, plus, though, I think like mainstream rock in the 60s and the 70s from when they grew up was like that's all you had. It wasn't like now where you have like an underground and you have a mainstream. It's just like that is the band, Led Zeppelin or whoever, So if you like music at all from those decades, I think you'd have a pretty decent record collection, I think. So. But they didn't listen to bad bands like Bread or Air Supply. So,
what band was your first band? Was your special band that was yours that wasn't anyone else's?
Well, definitely that would have come along more in the 90s. When definitely like I discovered like bands with long hair, things like that. And I think probably Alice in Chains, maybe, if I have to think back to one of the first heavy bands that was really, definitely though the Misfits, like Michael Graves' Misfits. I was a little more into punk and ska and things before I got into metal. And then once I found metal, I was like, oh, this is what I always wished that this would just push over into the whole time. So, yeah, I definitely was guilty of doing the 90s ska a little bit, too. So
Ska is fun.
It can be fun.
The hideous dance, that skank dance. It's just,
oh my God,
so
terrible.
Unattractive.
I saw a meme that said ska music is what plays in a 13-year-old's head when they get extra mozzarella sticks.
Yes, I've seen that. What would be that first metal band?
Okay, so when I got into metal, it was honestly the goopy European stuff, the operatic Nightwish and, Nightwish and The Gathering were like the gateway because I was only a classical singer when I first started, actually, which is just really weird now, considering that I don't very much do that on albums at all. I'll do it. It depends on the project, I guess. But for the most part, I don't. I prefer not to. And the thing is, though, I couldn't do anything else. And the first time I heard like Tarja with Nightwish, I was like, oh my God, this is not only an opera singer in a heavy band, but like an actual opera singer, not like someone kind of being mislabeled, like it was for real. So it sounded like the way that I sounded, So I was like, wow, this is so cool. But then the other things that completely got me almost exactly around the same time was At the Gates. I mean, Slaughter of the Soul was like a life changing for me because that's the first time I heard somebody convey with their vocals like that much, like Thomas Lindbergh, like big influence on me. Like the I feel like you cannot convey that kind of pain. Like when he'd be like, nauseating pain, I'd be like, like it'd be like so good because you could like feel it, you know what I mean? Like it just was like so good. And then also too, definitely when Wages of Sin came out and just the opening riffs, Arch Enemy, like, and I went and I saw, I think I played at the same one, like the very first tour they did with Angela in the States. My first terrible shitty band, we played at the same Milwaukee Metal Fest. This was when that was still a thing. And they played too. And I saw her come out on the stage and I was like, I need to do that. Like I couldn't scream at all, but I was like, that's what's happening. So yeah, that's more than one.
That's good. I like that. I agree with a lot of those. At the Gates, I still go back to that very frequently. Vox&Hops is about hanging out with my metal friends, talking about their lives, music, and craft beer. What do you have on your side there? Did you manage to find some craft beer in Vegas?
Well, like I mentioned, it's not that apocalyptic here. Actually, Vegas is very chill, even when it's in business. So I was able to get some beer. And although I went kind of literally fruity, I have the mango cart, so which is like a fruity wheat ale. But I'm from Wisconsin, and there's a lot of like Belgian style, like the fruity, like the the cherry with the wheat and all of these and the raspberry and all this type of stuff. So I really got like those infusions of the fruit. So I love the mango cart.
Mango cart, and who's that made by?
Golden Road Brewing.
Beautiful. On my side, I went with it's becoming a classic of mine. I really enjoy it. It's Noctem Artisans Brasseurs. All of their cans have these really cute cats on them.
I was just going to say, that can is so awesome.
Yeah, this is Oskar HMS Ark Royal. I don't know what that is. It is 7%. It is mostly hopped with Sabro and Mosaic, which are our two favorite hops. It's an IPA. It's absolutely delicious. Are you a craft beer enthusiast, having come from Wisconsin, those wheat beers? Is it something that you still actively search out now?
Well, I'm more of a wine person than a beer person, as far as like that level of nerdery, you know. But I really can appreciate a good beer. I'm kind of opposite of you. I don't like hoppiness that much. I don't like IPAs very much. I do really like Belgian style things, and I like yeast wheats and things like Francis Connor as a classic favorite, you know, or like sort of the Belgian cherry with the wheat or the raspberry. So I definitely got the appreciation for that from living in Wisconsin, because certainly all sorts of European immigrants settled there, and so there's certainly a lot of breweries still. There's even some beers that you can only get in Wisconsin that they won't mass produce. And so some people, you know, seek those out and things like that. But I don't like the cold. So, but yeah, I can hang with some beer.
It's brutal today. We woke up to snow here, believe it or not. End of April in Montreal. Yeah. It's just...
Well, that sounds like Montreal,
right? It just never ends here. Take me to joining that first band. When you joined that first band, was it still with an operatic voice, or had you started to delve into the more extreme vocals?
So the first band, I didn't do any extreme vocals. I actually didn't understand what was being done in the extreme vocals. And I joined my first band right as soon as I got to college, pretty much. Because I went to college for music, and that's where all the nerds, that's where all the metal nerds are, right? Is in the music department. So... or somewhere in the art department or something at college, pretty much. And so all these guys were like, you know, the Dream Theater nerds. Like, they're the really, like, prog nerds, the metal nerds. And this band wanted a singer, and, you know, they were like, we're trying to be like The Gathering and this and that. And I was like, okay. And I couldn't really do what's called belting, like our regular rock singing. Hey, you know, I couldn't really do that, actually. I couldn't really do that super well, till maybe like a couple years after college, even though I definitely started doing it at that time in these bands. But my range was very limited. I didn't have a lot of control, and I certainly couldn't do harsh vocals. So I'm usually really transparent about the things I've had to learn over the years. Since I teach them, I try to make people understand that this is not stuff that I just woke up and did one day. So it takes some practice.
You have to keep practicing. I screamed for the first time, what was it, on Monday or Sunday? A few days ago. And I hadn't screamed since
when?
July.
Yeah. Oh, what?
Yeah, it was horrible. I was so mad at myself. And
was it like...
No,
that's
it
like
works.
my first
it works, but it wasn't where I wanted it to be. So I have to definitely push that everyone, if you want to keep something in shape, you got to use it.
That's the thing. It's like you got to scrape the dust off of it. Yeah, before tour, like I have to do a certain thing where I build the set up. And now in this band, it's almost all clean singing, and I find that to be much more challenging, honestly, for me personally, than the harsh vocals. And so I have now decided that I just need to practice more regularly. Like I just need to be like running sets regularly for that level. That's how difficult I find it. So you're right. No matter how when I'm referring to my first band, I'm literally talking, like 20 years ago. So this is 20 years of practice, and I'm still like, I need to practice more. That's the life you're leading,
Well, I say it on the podcast. If you ever think that you've made it, that you're done, then you should stop.
That's pretty much it. If you're not, here's where it really hit me. I know this is a stupid show, but The Masked Singer, the first season, I really liked it, the first couple seasons, and now I'm kind of like, it's just so much going on. But the first season, Donny Osmond was one of the guys, right? And so this is a guy he was 62, because I was like looking up their ages, because two of the top three were like in their 60s and their 70s, Donny Osmond and Gladys Knight. And I was like, okay, so these older people are wasting like everyone in the competition, just like crushing them. And dude, neither one of these people, they have like Grammys, they have like tons of awards, they literally have like lived their career. They have no reason to do it other than the love of the art, like literally no reason to be on this show at all, especially being older. They could just be retired, they have money, they just love the art, right? And this guy, he said he was like going home and watching himself, Donny Osmond, and like critiquing himself at home at like 62 years old, after like he was performing since he was a little kid, so like maybe 55 years of stage experience, more stage experience than I could fit in my current lifetime. And yet he's still sitting there analyzing everything he did, you know what I mean? And trying to win this contest and trying to improve and trying to get better. So that's really shows you like that's how the pros do it. If you want to be that good, like that's the detail you have to go to, and you never stop. You could be 50 years of practice and you're still like watching yourself like, yeah, I need to do this more. I need to change that.
Never satisfied. That's the secret to a great talent. To take us to starting to teach people. You had people teach you. How did you teach yourself to scream? Where did you get yourself? Did you have mentors, or did you just develop it yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I learned to scream in the early 2000s. So people who were working on this type of research and things were just barely able to scratch the surface. They were just barely coming around. So there wasn't a lot of information on harsh vocals. But I started doing harsh vocals about maybe 2 years after I started college, which at that point I had a couple years of classical training under my belt, and I knew much more clearly how to support with the air properly in any style and kind of how to place certain sounds. So I just started making, what I would call like a false chord scream, but just sort of impersonating like Angela Gasso and stuff. And placing it in the same place I would place classical, and squeezing it from the same place in the abs. And I was never going hoarse. I could feel the tingling of the tissues flapping around, which now we know a lot about. I could show you an endoscopy and you can watch someone's false chords flap. But I just knew that from knowing what I knew about the voice, that it's very delicate. If you're doing something wrong, you will go hoarse. You can't just, a lot of people are under the impression that you can just do something wrong and then wake up one day and be like, my voice is fucked. It doesn't work like that. Like, if you're doing something wrong, you're going to notice before the set's like even over. Like, you're not even going to make it through this, you're going to feel, it's going to feel terrible. And so I definitely knew that I wasn't going hoarse. So I could just go right back to clean singing without any problem. So I was like, well, I guess I don't know what's going on, but I was like, I know I'm doing something right. And then I knew. That's the other thing. I was starting to listen to all these bands that even in the early 2000s had already been around a while. Carcass, At the Gates, Opeth, In Flames. And so I was like, oh, okay, all these people have been doing harsh vocals already like a decade at that point. Like they'd already been around a while, between 5 to 10 years already. And I was like, so there has to be something that they're doing right. So like just kind of deducing from what I knew about vocal knowledge, I was like, you can't just do something for 10 years and not hurt yourself. It doesn't work like that. So I knew before I knew the research that, before the research came out, that whatever I was doing, it was pretty much okay. And I was right, thankfully. But I remember I brought my 72-year-old opera coach, Wages of Sin, the arch enemy, and she was like, I just don't even know what is happening here. Like,
that's hilarious.
And it was hilarious. Like, I can't even believe I did that in hindsight.
I had a Broadway. I was taught Broadway vocals, and I brought her my first demo. And I left it in her mailbox after I wasn't her student anymore. So I never got to see her reaction.
That's hilarious. hilarious. Yes, I don't think. Carlene passed, my teacher, because she would be like very, very old, like 90 now. But I don't think I was already in metal bands, so I think she already knew that that was going to be the trajectory.
She had lost you. Yes.
Yes, I was actually quite good classical singer, and I'm a contralto, which is a rare voice type. And they were always like, "You're going to have a career," and I was just like, "I do not want a career in classical singing. It's just brutal." So, nope, not for me.
Having interviewed Enrico Di Lorenzo of Hideous Divinity, who is a voice doctor in Italy, and having done all these studies, as you were mentioning, with the camera down the throat, and he says that a lot of the times most of the patients that he's seeing are actually opera singers and pop singers, and they're the ones that are getting hurt more than us death metal singers. So that's very interesting.
Yes, because this is exactly what I've heard from several doctors, and because the reason is because when we're making most of our sounds, they sound very extreme, but in general, we're just using tissues to just flap around and create white noise. And it's very benign when you actually look at it. It sounds extreme, but as far as like what it does to your actual vocal folds, it almost does nothing to them. And so what's beautiful is if you're doing it correctly, you are not actually putting your vocal folds through the paces that a clean singing person is. And that's also, too, why I feel as though being in a band that's more clean singing is much more work. It's a lot more stamina to mitigate. This is why, like, you know, we adjust the tuning and things, and it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with to make sure that that clean voice isn't straining. There's just so much with clean singers. It can be insane. Yeah.
Take me to coming to the point where you felt comfortable teaching people.
I started teaching people really early. Like as soon as I had I've been singing and doing musical theater and things since I was like 10. And I always took piano since then and everything. So I started teaching people basic voice lessons like when I was like 18 in my parents' living room, and after the summers between college, they were very annoyed. Because the piano is so loud, and I'd have like young students, you know, so it was like more basic things. And then I taught off and on continuously for years, even if I did other jobs or careers. And then I about 5 years ago, I decided to do it all on Skype. And about 3 years ago is when I started doing YouTube stuff. And now my full-time job entirely is just coaching people. And it's great, though, because once I moved it to Skype, because even people that live in town here, like say I have clients in Vegas, but it's still, that's like a 20-minute drive each way. You know, that's 40 minutes added to your lesson time. So people still prefer Skype, you know, so yeah.
I'm discovering it with this, that I would go downtown, go into the craft beer bar, wait for the artist, hang out with them for a bit, finish my beer, and then, of course, we'd have another beer.
Yes.
Hang out then, and then I'd go to the show, blah, 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 come back home, I'd be hungover. Now it's like just an hour in, out, and that's it. It's there's some...
That's what I'm saying.
There's some perks to the internet. But there's also you had such a broader reach, because if you're teaching such a niche technique style of vocals that people want all across the globe, your student pool to choose from became much bigger, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think that's part of why I'm in business, because I have like a global during the virus, you know, because I have a global economy to work from, and certainly you can find enough people in the world to study with you during the time being. But yeah, it's really shows you too the power of sort of an international language. What a time we're living in, where we do have almost an international language with English, because my folks from all over the world, I mean, I speak English and Spanish, but I don't teach in Spanish, really. I don't know if I can translate like the terminology exactly. I think I just end up, half the time you just end up using the English word anyway for things like anatomy. So a lot of the terms don't translate anyway. So, or there simply is no word that exists, you know what I'm saying? You just have to use the English word. So it really shows you, people blow my mind, how fluent they have to be to study in a lesson with me. And I'll have people as far as China, like some really very different, the English would be a very different second language. And so I'm actually impressed by all the people who study with me and their ability to learn such an in-depth subject in a second language, and how that has changed the whole world. And that's just fascinating, so.
Who is your typical student?
Actually, most of the people who study with me are professionals. They are usually, I have more serious folks working with me. I won't coach anyone under 18. Largely because, young people do not have impulse control, and we're talking about like harsh vocals. I mean, that's a scientifically proven fact that teenagers' brains don't have the impulse control development. So you're asking someone they have to be able to mitigate risk to an adult perspective so that they can weigh risks and stop if it hurts and things like that. So I won't coach very young folks. And even the people under 21, I'm kind of like, So most of the people I teach, though, are well over 21, and they're usually career people that tour. I have a tremendous amount of voice actors. I'll get producers who are trying to learn to do the sounds so they can make their own music. I've coached a few of the bigger YouTubers. And so people are just really the working, serious people who kind of want to get down. I do have beginners, but beginners are always welcome. But there's usually somebody like serious that has a reason for investing the time and the effort. Because when you get up to the level we're talking about with the harsh vocals, it's advanced study, and you got to really want to put it in there, to do it. So, yeah.
You don't wait from July till April. It doesn't work, people.
No, right. Exactly. So,
take me to where you find your content. I know that for myself, with the podcast, I've become so obsessive of having a backlog of content to the point where I have a little bit too much right now. But I can't stop myself. I always want more. How do you generate new content, and how do you find enough hours in a day to give lessons and keep putting stuff out to keep your YouTubers happy?
I sometimes don't, to be honest with you. I've just now recently gotten to kind of a content flow, and it's taken me a long time to get there. Because it can take hours for me to edit a video, particularly if I'm trying to make it look a little more interesting. I do everything myself. I have zero help as far as editing, recording, filming, everything. I do totally in-house myself. What I do is I'll be up till midnight, I mean, it's kind of just the way it is. It's the most important thing to remember is even if you can't get content out regularly, I've been super bad about that, and I'm just starting to get into a flow about starting to have a formula where I can do it all the time. But it's just still keep putting it out. Just keep doing it when you have time. It's sort of like a diet. If you don't do it every day, don't quit, because if you make it 15 or 20 days out of the month, that's still half the month that you didn't eat that way or whatever. It's still a success. And I think a lot of people are too obsessed with if they don't make a certain schedule that they've sort of failed or whatever. Just keep putting content out, even if you can't quite get it on an even schedule. People will keep coming, and you just keep offering valuable information. That's the thing. If you have a valuable information to come, the formula, it's less dependent on that if you have quality content. But certainly being consistent and having quality content is much better. So I'm getting up to that level finally, but I'm tracking an album right now. I'm making new content. I'm editing a big collaboration. I'm doing lessons all day. So I'll be up until last night I was recording literally till midnight, and so that's just my days. I will just go all day long, basically, and that's how I do it. So,
well, thank you for taking in some time to drink a beer with me. This is your break.
Yeah, this is great. This actually fit. Yeah, no, this is wonderful. This is a nice break.
Tell me about recording yourself. I always work with my guitarist, Christian Donaldson. I'm so comfortable working with him. He's the best vocal producer that I've ever worked with. Not that I've worked with too many. So how do you deal with recording yourself? Do you feel comfortable with that?
Honestly, the best stuff I have done has been with the producer. Like, for example, Luna Mortis, we did a record with Jason Sukoff. And
yes, shout out to Sukoff.
Yeah, and to this day, even 10 years later, dude, I was at NAMM, and Jeff Loomis comes up to me and he's like, I still listen to that record like every week. I was like, what? And it was like, it just blows my mind. People will still tell me how they love how that vocals sound, even like a decade later. And, Jason acts all goofy on the internet, but he's not in the studio. Like, he put me through the ringer, and he can sing just as good or better than everyone he has in there, pretty much. He can certainly sing and scream better than me. And so he would grab the mic out of my hand and be like, no, this is what's supposed to be there. And just nail a harmony or nail the part or whatever. And he'd be like, your few cents flex. He also has perfect pitch, which so you're sitting there. He just put me through the ringer. But at one point he was like, look, you're like a trained singer, so I can get you to do enough takes till it's actually in tune. It's going to save me a lot of time, on this. So you're going to do it. Like, suck it up and do it. And but now, like a decade later, I'm a lot more serious by myself at home. We have an amazing guy, this guy Chris Collier, who's going to mix the record. He's super good. He did a fantastic test mix for us, and he gave me this Slate virtual mic. That's what I'm doing the podcast through right now. So I've been doing everything through that. And now I am a lot more equipped to assess objectively if my vocals are good or not. If you're new to vocals and you haven't been with a lot of producers, I don't think recording yourself is good or realistic, because you're going to accept takes that are garbage. That, you have to be really self-critical. And but what I do is I'm just very objective now. I've gotten zen about it. It's taken me years, but you have to get zen about listening to it like a vocal producer and just saying, okay, this is out of tune, or this, kind of feel is good or isn't good. You can't bullshit yourself at all. If you're ready to do that and you're a real experienced vocalist, like, as far as like actual tracking, the gain, bouncing the tracks, like, I'm super good at that. I do all my own editing. I'll do pretty much everything except for tune it and like vocal line it. I'll let the mixer do that. But comping, editing, the whole shebang, I'll do the whole deal. And you've got to approach it like, if this was not me, if this was a professional record, would I accept this take? And you have to be super honest with yourself. And it takes me a long time and a lot of tracks. But if you can get to that point, you can get zen about it. I would like to go in the studio with somebody, but my band is kind of spread out at the moment, and we just kind of felt like we weren't quite there yet for this record. So
good. Everyone's excited to hear the new Helion Prime.
Yeah, it's going to be cool.
Tell me about, this is something that I like to make a point of whenever I have a female guest. I am fed up of these female-fronted packages of that stupid question of, what is it like to be a girl in metal? I know everyone asks you, and this is not my way of asking it.
Yes.
I think that it should just be finished and gone. I just had Cheney Crab on the podcast. The episode came out a few days ago from Entios, and I asked her the same thing. How does she feel about this archaic classification?
It's weird because, I've been doing this so long. So I was the only girl like 15 years ago, and it's so surprising to me. We're going to do a festival in Vancouver. Yeah. It keeps getting rescheduled, so fingers crossed. I mean, it's out of their control. It's just whatever the world decides, right? But I keep looking at the lineup, and again, it's not this guy's an amazing promoter. He's awesome. It's just sort of the scene's fault, if you will. I think there's one other female, like, musician, period, not even these things. So it's like, it still blows my mind that there are not a lot of women fronting the bands, that there's not a lot of women in the bands, and that there's certainly a little bit more than there was 15 years ago, but it's like not very much more. Like I'm still like I'm really pleased to see more like all female bands coming out. But right, it should be objective at this point. Like every other job and career, we pretty much have evolved to objectivity. So at this point, I think female fronted as a genre is very dated. I think at first in places like Europe, it kind of helped propel some of the symphonic bands or whatever. But I think now it makes no sense because it's not actually a genre. You have, again, like men are in multiple genres, women can be in multiple genres, but it depends on the place and the country. In a place like Japan where they still are evolving some of their ideas towards women, even though they have a lot of female musicians, the questions in the interviews are still like that. I was in there with White Empress and my bass player Cella was there, and they did literally ask her the question, like, what is it like to be a female bass player? So in certain countries where things are still evolving, people are definitely still asking those silly questions. But as it is good because we're starting to see more people of color in the metal scene. We're starting to see more women in the scene. But I think people are getting more objective about everything and not like, oh, what's it like to be this kind of person in a band? Insert minority here. It could be female, it could be ethnicity, but at the same time, it's so silly to have it be labeled female fronted. It did and didn't do a service because on the one hand, you had things like female metal fests in Europe that did very well and did give a lot of exposure to certain bands. But on another hand, now that that's kind of come and gone, I think that has created sort of a problem. Now it's sort of like, at first it was like, well, we can't have a female-fronted band on this package. Like, if you go with Arch Enemy, does it have to be all 3 female-fronted bands? You know what I mean? People started doing that, and then that kind of screwed everybody. But now I do see more even packages and things like that, and people looking at it less. Half the time people think I'm a guy anyway. No, I'm just kidding. When I do my clean singing too, they think I'm Sozos, the singer before me, the male singer for Helion Prime. But no, but in all honesty, I'm glad to see it kind of evolve. I do wish there was more women still. I don't get what the barrier is. I don't see a lot of women in recording either, and I don't understand that either. So
it's going to take people like you to be the flame to push them towards it, so that's good.
Yeah.
Just keep it coming, girls. You're all welcome.
Yes.
Let's balance out this party and all the minorities, please. Let's bring it all out. One last question. What is your hangover cure?
Oh, okay. Well, one of the best things you can do is emergency. I don't know if have you ever heard of this?
Yes, people have said that, yeah.
Yes, so that's honestly one of the best things. The problem is it's like super acidic, so it's kind of a hit and miss. It's like if you can get it down, emergency will be the best. And I also think cannabis, any sort of, or if you can find an anti-emetic like a Dramamine or something. Something like that will reduce like the nauseating feeling, and then so you could do that without cannabis, obviously, Dramamine or something like that, motion sickness medicine, and then emergency, and I think you'll be good to go. That works really good.
Spoken like a pro. Mary, thank you so much for taking some time, sharing a craft beer with me, talking about your life, your music. It's always fun. Next time, hopefully together.
That'd be great. Let me know when you guys tour Vegas. I will definitely come see you. That'll be wonderful. So hopefully within the next year or so, tours will happen again.
I hope so too. Funny enough, I interviewed Brittany Slays and you were upstairs and I didn't even know it.
Yes. Oh, really? Was that must have been on the...
Piranha Bar in Montreal. That little bar upstairs there.
Oh, yes. So that must have been on the tour we did with Stryker?
That's right. Yes.
Yes. Well, you know what? Actually, I think Helion Prime, we did not do the Canadian dates on that tour, so I wasn't even there. Yeah, so you didn't actually miss me because I was like, wait a minute. We didn't go to Canada, like visa stuff, so we missed like 5 days of that tour, I think. But yeah, that was a great package. Brittany's amazing vocalist. Technically, performance-wise, it was to go out on tour with her and Dan from Stryker. I was like, oh my God, I have my work cut out for me as a vocalist. I've got to bring it every night. They were both amazing. So
yeah, they're the best, and both Vox&Hops alumni.
Yes. Well, I can see why. So.
Cheers.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Matt. Thank you. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Hey, thank you so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. It's always fun to sit down with extremely talented vocalists that know exactly how their voice works. It's always an honor, and I love these chats. So we could have gone on for way longer. It's basically how Vox&Hops started. I would just always pick other vocalists' brains and ask them how about their technique, about how they warm up, and it always ended up being an interesting conversation. So a huge shout out to Mary. If anyone out there wants to maintain or improve their vocal techniques, the best person to go do that with is Mary, and you can contact her via the links that I'm putting in the description of this podcast. I hope that you guys have a great weekend. I hope you get to go outside. I hope you get to enjoy some fresh air. I will be back at you next week with 3 more episodes, one on Monday, one on Wednesday, and another on Friday. But until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.